Hello everybody, welcome back to another edition of the EcoStruxure Machine Expert training. I'm your host, Leandro Umada, and in this video what we're going to talk about is the right values that we have, basically the force values in our application using the software. So let's go to the presentation. So we have two possibilities to write and force the value in our software. So there are two main differences between all of them. So the first thing that we need to know is how we can do the write and how we can make the force of a value. So if we just go to the application, okay, we just need to go to debug, and then below you can find these two options, write values and force value, and you have the direct access. You see the Control F7 and F7, okay, and once you force the value, you can have the possibility to unforce it, okay, using the Alt F7. Okay, so that's the main thing that you need to know, and you can force any of the internal variables that you have in the controller. So let's go to the presentation here, this part. So the main difference between the write value and force value is that how the system write this value on the controller. Okay, so the write value, basically it just write the value that you want, okay, in one cycle of the controller. The force value, it writes in every cycle that you have in the controller. So imagine that you are making a comparison or doing something in the logic. So you force the value, okay, at the beginning of the PRU, and then you make some changes of that value, okay, it will be affected by your logic, okay, and in the next cycle it will be forced again by the software, okay. So that's something that you need to know when you are trying to debug or do something, because probably you cannot see clearly if there is an issue, okay. So let me just change the view so you can see it completely here. You should read this part over here. You can pay attention to this. So basically these are the steps for the force, okay. So the controller read the inputs, then we force everything, then there will be the execution of the code, and then the force the values, okay. So this is how is the cycle of the forcing, okay. So that is something that you need to make sure when you're trying to do your code, okay, because it will be affected in the middle over here, okay. It will be affected. So that is something that you need to pay attention. And as I mentioned here, the write values, it just grab the value one time, okay, and that's all. So once you force the value, okay, you have the possibility to unforce using the Alt F7, okay, to unforce the value, and you will see this message over here, okay. And if you're trying to log out, you should be able to see this also, okay. So you can predefine the value that you want, okay, or remove it or then release it without a modification of the value that you have, okay. But again, if you're forcing something and then you unforce it, it will be modified by the values that you have or the logic that you have in the software. So the idea to see how this force work, okay, what I'm going to do is to replicate this code, okay, as we have over here. So let me just put this in the other screen, put this like this, just wait for a minute. Now, okay, so we have everything open now. So what I want to do is to recreate this code that I showed you before. So I'm going to create a new PRU as a text, PRU st. Hopefully I don't have any other PRU with this name. Okay, good. So I'm going to add an if condition, then w bar plus 1, and then x condition false. Okay, and now if X condition, then W bar 2. I'm going to create the variables later, or 2 plus 1. So I just want you to pay attention now, because when I simulate this, what I'm going to do, let's use int, it doesn't matter, should be, okay, boolean. Okay, so the idea behind this is that I'm going to force the value for the condition, okay? And you can see here in the first part, in the first line, I'm going to make the comparison. So if by default it's going to be 0, so I'm going to force it to true. When it's true, then I can add 1 to this value right over here. In the next line, I'm going to write the value false to the same variable. So the variable that was forced in 1, then it's going to be false. So if it's false, then here in this condition, it's not going to be executed, and the W bar 2 is going to be in 0 always. Okay, so that's the main important thing. So I'm going to show you that even if you force the value, okay, you need to pay attention in your logic. So if we simulate, it's in simulation. Okay. Okay. And something I forget to do is to call this view. So what we need to do is to log out the controller and call this view in the must. Okay, good. Okay, login and play. So as you can see, all the variables are in 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do, you can't force the values. Okay, if you, for example, double click on the variables on the boolean, you can change the status. So if it is false, you can go to true, or leave it in false, and if you press again, it will be to the main value. For the analog values, you just double click, and then you can specify which should be the next value that you want. Okay, for example 5. Okay, and you can see it over there. Okay, if you remove it, okay, it's gonna be the same value. So if you go to the back, you can write the value that you want to change. Okay, in this case it was 0. So in this part, what I'm going to do is to make only one write. If I do the write, it will only add 1 to this value and nothing to the second one. So online, debug, write values. Okay, and you can see, even if I write the value, okay, the code change it, okay, from true to false. Now what I want to do is to show you what happened if I force the value. So double click on this one to be true, online, debug, force value. So you can see that the force value has the F for force next to it. Okay, and you can see that in the visualization, okay, you can see in true and says, okay, but this one is true, one is not executing, what happened? Okay, don't worry, here you need to check the code, because it will depend on the execution of the controller. So in each cycle the controller, it will execute, it will force the value. Okay, that's why even if you see this in true, okay, it's not executing the code, and it makes sense. Okay, so now what I can do is to, okay, unforce values, yes, and there we go. Okay, so in this way you can unforce the value. So what happened now if I force the value, force the value, okay, and now I'm going to disconnect. You have this message. Okay, okay, yes, and then I'm going to try to log in again and see the behavior I have. Okay, it will unforce everything. So this is basically the right unforced value. You need to pay attention in how you execute the code, okay, because the force, again, it will write in each cycle, okay, at the beginning of each cycle, and not in the complete code that you have. So probably if you analyze everything with the force, okay, you may have different behaviors as you have expected comparing the visualization. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I see you on the next one.